Thanks for the thorough review. How did it compare to the KTM 390 engine-wise? I had a go at the 390, but absolutely no power under 4,000 RPM. What I will say is the Scrambler 400X is night and day different, considering almost identical engines. And I believe this is down to the gearing. The Scrambler 400X has much lower gearing. You're getting access to that power earlier, which completely changes the dynamics of the bike. When taking off, it was super easy. You just let out the clutch. It was a very hard bike to stall. It was far easier to ride in lower RPMs in my experience compared to the 390 Adventure. The flip side of that is obviously with shortening the gear ratios is that means you're going to be stretching this bike when you're doing higher speeds. So that again is where the KTM 390's gear spread comes into play. It's a far better bike out on the highway in my experience because it has longer legs. Whereas the Scrambler, once you hit about 110 kilometers an hour, it's got more than enough power to keep going. It's just the vibrations start to become quite intrusive at 110 plus. So that would be in a nutshell, but yes, if your main concern is below 4,000 RPM, the Scrambler X is the far superior bike in that aspect. G'day guys, welcome back to another video. Today it's time to do our monthly Q&A. I have an awful lot of questions based on the Triumph Scrambler 400X I recently reviewed, so I'll try and answer as many of them as I can without it being too much on one bike. And I'll also take some questions from the rest of the month as well. So let's dive into the most interesting and pressing questions of the month. Why would anyone choose the Scrambler 400X over the FANTIC Caballero 500 Rally? I've ridden both of these bikes, and the FANTIC Caballero 500 not only makes more power, also feels a little more premium, but it's also far more off-road capable with real proper off-road suspension, spoke wheels set up to really get dirty, whereas the Scrambler 400X is a soft roader. However, the big difference, and this might be country to country, but here in Australia at least, there's a $4,000 to $5,000 price differential depending on what dealership you go to. And for whatever reason, FANTIC's Caballero 500 Rally is significantly more expensive. Now, I understand in other countries the gap might be a little bit closer, but there is a price differential. So I think that is a big one. But also user friendliness. The FANTIC Caballero 500 is less learner friendly than the Triumph Scrambler 400X. The Scrambler 400X just is telepathic to ride. You do not have to think about it. Whereas the FANTIC does have enough power where you do need to be switched on. It has a very characterful engine as well. It's a very specific bike for a very specific kind of person, whereas the Triumph Scrambler is more of an everyman scrambler. It's easier to live with, less vibrations, and is a better road bike in my opinion. It's far more comfortable just for the commuting duty. Now, the other factor in here, on top of the price differential and the ease of use that the Scrambler has as an advantage, there's far more Triumph dealerships. Those are some reasons why I can see the Scrambler 400X being chosen over the Caballero 500 Rally. Does the Scrambler 400X make my short list of motorcycles? No, not really, but let me explain. For one, the bike behind me, my CRF 300L, it does a lot of what the 400X would do if it was in my garage. The overlap is too close. The 300L is much, much better off-road, and on-road the 300L is adequate enough for me not really to feel the need for another small displacement road bike. If I was going to get a road bike, and I do intend on doing so, but finances are a little tight with a little gremlin running around in the house now, but when I do get around to it, I am looking for something with a little more grunt. I like a big twin for the road, something with some character, a little bit different, and plenty of power. That's just my preference out on the road. I've been riding long enough to know who I am and what I want. But the 400X really did something special for me. All my presumptions dropped away. This was such an easy bike to ride, had a little bit of character, looked great, and to boot, it can be taken off-road to some degree as well. So I really loved it for that. It reinvigorated my passion for riding, as well as helped remind me not to make up my mind about a motorcycle before I ride it. I definitely wouldn't balk at anyone if they chose one. I think it's a great bike, particularly if this is going to be your first bike. I think for a learner or a returning rider, this is the real sweet spot. Can the Scrambler 400X go off-road to the same degree as the 390 Adventure? The current 2024, we're not talking about the 2025 updated version coming out that will be far superior off-road. I would say yes to a general degree. Both would be very comparable off-road. I've only ridden the 390 off-road. Same wheel sizes, same engine characteristics. There are a few things that would differentiate each. I think the KTM ultimately would have the slightly better suspension, but the Scrambler 400X has the better rider triangle off-road straight out of the box. The 390, the way the pegs angle you forward, it always feels like you're about to topple over the front of the headlight. If I was to choose which one to take off-road, despite the KTM 390 having the better suspension and being the more off-road bike design-wise, I would prefer to take the Scrambler 400X because of that rider triangle. It just felt more natural to me. I'd be more confident hitting the dirt with that bike. With the right tires, I'd be happy to take that off-road, and it would be my preference over the 390. But that's just me personally. Both bikes pretty much do the same thing. The 390 far better out on the open road with that fairing and the higher gear ratios. But in saying that, the Scrambler, because it has shorter gear ratios, you'd be less likely to stall as well. So I think it would be my personal choice, the Scrambler 400X off-road, but we are splitting hairs here, so just remember that. Do you think the weight of the 2025 390 Enduro will land right about the weight of the 690 Enduro R? Ultimately, this 390 is designed out of a road bike. Straight out of the gate, they're working at a handicap because the initial design wasn't accounting for weight being one of the major factors in the engineering process. Whereas the 690 Enduro R, it was designed to be lightweight from the get-go. So that was in their mind to start with. But with this 390, they've had to work their way back and get creative in trying to shave weight to make it applicable for off-road. The other justification for why I believe this will probably be heavier than the 690 Enduro R, and by a considerable margin, is the weight of the new 390 Duke, which has this motor, and this new Duke is basically within a few kilos of the old Duke. It really hasn't changed too much, but I'll take what I can get at this point. So I'm still excited about the bike, but you should not expect this to be a super lightweight bike to weigh as much as a dual sport does. Remember, this is coming from a road bike. It has the heart of an adventure bike. It's going to have adventure bike weight. I don't think this is going to be significantly lighter than the 390 Adventure in its current form. Obviously going to save some weight from the removal of all those plastics, and perhaps they've got some little engineering tricks, but I would definitely bet that this is going to be heavier by a decent degree over the 690 Enduro R. You make one of the best moto content channels in Australia. I genuinely miss watching your riding videos and hope life allows you to get back on the bike doing what you love. I'm in a similar boat, but just got myself a 690R and can't wait to properly get out there. Cheers, Eddie Turbo. Thanks, mate. That 690 Enduro R is going to be a fantastic motorcycle, absolute weapon of a dual sport. As to my riding videos, thanks for letting me know that you love them so much. It's always a passion project doing the off-road rides because it is a small amount of my audience that really like those off-road ride-alongs. It's kind of a YouTube era of yesteryear. It's an acquired taste these days, but I really do enjoy them. And yes, I agree with you. It's an absolute shame I haven't been able to do them recently. It's just been a hectic couple of years for me. I do have a lot of reviews of motorcycles planned, so at least I'll be riding out on the road and hopefully a little bit of dirt if some of the manufacturers will let me. Thanks a lot, guys. The support means a lot. And as always, don't forget to stay shiny side up.